có em sẽ ngủ. Em sẽ ngủ từ lúc em đặt chân về tới nhà là em sẽ ngủ luôn. Ngủ sáng mai luôn. Quá cái ngủ mà. Vui vẻ.
Okay, welcome back in class. So let's continue on this nice case. And I want now to discuss with you this one question. Why did Time propose to merge with Warner? And I want to create your awareness that what you publicly state in the newspaper is quite often different from the true story. So, what others stated, if you have to go to the press and tell to the journalist what is the reason, and if you think about what is the true reason, what comes into your mind? Okay, what an overwhelming...
So just like when we read the case study, right, it was like the town shareholder which was having a kind of shareholder meeting, and then they decided that the only way for the company to really grow further is they need to decide among a list of potential merger candidates, and then they would just pick out Tom as the kind of initially ideal one at that time.
So basically, alone we are too small. Yeah, that is something that you quite often hear. Yeah, we need to be bigger. Yeah, why is bigger better? Why is small not sustainable?
Because they want to make use of the kind of like economy of scale. And, so.
Could be economies of scale. By merging with Warner, we become more cost effective, because we produce more. Anything else that was that you would think the CEO would state to the public?
We want to reduce costs.
Sorry?
Reduce costs.
Reduce cost. Become more cost efficient, stronger, basically.
So I think another quite specific thing is that Time is like the company of publishing, and this also you have power in publishing, and it can never touch the part of entertainment, so you may want to expand more and gain the benefits of both companies in order to expand also larger.
Warner is more film and entertainment, Time is more printing, press, publishing. And the idea is if you combine entertainment and film with publishing houses, you create something that is innovative, Yeah, you teach time to become more entertaining. Yeah, you could, let's call it, the publisher, like Time, plus an entertainment corporation, like Warner. If you add them, and then if you may add some new technology. When did the case happen? It was 80s, was it? So that was long before the internet. But usually you would say, yeah, with new technology, you could create something that is really special. Let's say that's stronger. Publisher becomes more entertainment. Entertainment gets access to news, and so everybody benefits just from the access to the knowledge of each other. And yeah, this is typically the first question. Why does an entertainment corporation and a publishing house basically become combined? And then, of course, you argue the combination enables us to do something that we could not do before. For example, you want to do entertainment films based on facts researched by Time. Then you could have better films based on better research or anything along your lines. What do you think is the true reason why they merged? Well, you know what happened afterwards, yeah? In the case. At the end of the case, what happens there? There was a nice saying, eat or be eaten. We know this from fish. Either you eat other fish and become strong, or you become the prey of other fishes and be eaten. This corporation is the same thing. Who threats to eat Time? Paramount. In the case, it really is like it falls from heaven. But of course, a takeover offer by Paramount doesn't come as a surprise. There was nothing like a completely surprising takeover offer. At the time, when Time and Warner was talking, there were already rumors on the market that Paramount was considering a takeover offer for Time. And the Time-Warner merger was the reaction to these rumors. Basically, the Time management said very openly, if we do nothing, we will be taken over by Paramount. We will all be fired because Paramount has its own managers, and this will be the end for the employment of the management board. If we merge with Warner, we become a big and strong company, probably not taken over by Paramount. And if you eat, there was another saying, too big to be swallowed. That is, if you have a large piece of meat in your mouth and you have to bring it down, if it's too big, you can't eat it. So firms that have become very big, and Time Warner basically is twice the size, you need much more money to acquire that firm. Paramount may simply not have the money to do this. And of course, you would never state this in the public. But one thing is clear, when you merge two companies, there will be only one board. One CEO, one CFO, and so forth remain. So the first thing that the people are concerned with is who will survive and who will be gone. And if you read the case carefully, when Time and Warner proposed their merger, the first thing that they think about is who is becoming the CEO. And what do we do with the old CEO? And hopefully, one CEO is already 65 years old. He wants to retire anyway. And he then becomes the chairman of the board, becoming a different position, which is still very honorable. So in a merger negotiation, besides the exchange rate, that is for the shareholders. The shareholders, of course, must find this attractive. They have to vote on this. But the most important thing for the managers is, of course, who is leaving, who is liquidated, and who can continue to steer the company. And in every merger announcement, basically, the first thing that you learn is who is planned to be the CEO, what happens with the other CEO. Usually, he also gets a position as a chairman, usually. And then, of course, there will be victims. And the victims will fight against this. And you have to overcome their resistance. Quite often the CFOs jeopardize these things. CFOs are needed in order to prepare all the financials. Without, if the CFO says, I don't give you my data, and without the data you can't basically do the calculations, then you have a bad situation. So you first must convince your CFO that he please cooperates. So preventing the Paramount takeover was clearly the most important objective here. And basically, who was it? One said the shareholders discussed and decided. Shareholders never discuss and shareholders never decide. They come together once a year, and all they have to do is to do votings. The management presents. We are the greatest guys. Look how great we are. This is our financial results, and now we have some great proposals. Would you please vote to merge with Warner? And then all you can do as a shareholder is yes or no. Shareholders do nothing else. It is managers to decide or to basically negotiate and to prepare plans. And shareholders, sometimes have a vote. And in M&A, of course, there were strong conflicts of interest. Managers, well, I think if you were a Times shareholder, you would clearly prefer the Paramount offer. $175, that's a lot of money. As a management team of Time, you prepare the Warner merger, because then you secure your own jobs. So there was this large conflict, and then the question is, what decision rights? Who is more powerful? In the end, if shareholders want Paramount, if management wants to merge with Warner, who is more powerful? And what are the powers, basically? And then, what do you have to think about? You have to think about what are the decisions that managers can do on their own, and what are the decisions where you need the shareholder approval. In this case, can you think whether or not, and for what, shareholder approval is needed? We come back to this in a minute. But in the end, of course, there was a clear conflict of interest. The management wants to merge with Warner in order to secure their jobs. Time shareholders clearly prefer to be taken over by Paramount because then they get $175. What a nice gift. and the outcome of this, let's look. So, Paramount is now basically going into it. The proposed merger with Warner is only announced but not realized. There are still two independent companies. You can simply say we abandon the merger plans, and this is basically what what Paramount is saying. Yeah, we want to buy time, but we don't want to buy Time Warner. Yeah, so this is subject to time abandoning the merger with Warner. And the easiest thing, of course, that the time management could say, we don't do this. Yeah, we do not abandon the merger. Any other reactions of the time management? If you are an M&A advisor, of course, you have to tell these people. Yeah? These people, for the first time in their life, are in such a situation. Yeah? They're really threatened. Yeah? They are threatened with being wiped out of the corporation, yeah? Become unemployed, yeah? Be never ever in the future again become a director or a manager of the corporation. Yeah? You as an investment banker, yeah, must think what could be possible reactions. And I list here some of them. Maybe you get other ideas, yeah? But you really need to be innovative, yeah, and creative. Yeah? So the easiest thing is I abandon the merger plan and recommend that shareholders should accept the Paramount offer. Yeah? This is what Paramount wants, but that's clearly not what the time management wants. Yeah? But by the way, shareholders have, this is a shareholder decision. Yeah? A tender offer is an offer to shareholder, and every shareholder can say yes or no. It must say yes or no. And if he says no, he rejects. Yeah? Whenever you look at power, yeah, you have to think about where is my decision needed. Yeah? In a tender offer, yeah, it is the power of the shareholders to say yes or no. Yeah? It is not the power of the CEO or of some managers to do this. Yeah, do nothing, basically leaving the merger plan unchanged and hope for shareholder approval. Yeah, because the merger plan, okay, now one more thing. If you read the case carefully, then you would have read that a merger requires to issue new shares. Yeah? Warner shareholders get new time shares. Yeah? And increasing the share capital, printing new shares, requires shareholder approval in every country of the world. Yeah? So if shareholders say no to this, then the merger transaction is over. Yeah? And then the condition is basically done, and Paramount may simply wait, yeah, until the shareholders say no. We say no to the merger is dead, yeah, and after then make the offer. Yeah? They would like to do the offer immediately, yeah, after the management basically declines the merger, but if the manager says no, I want to try, the shareholders can still say no. Yeah? So shareholders have power, yeah, when their vote is needed. Yeah? And we have this in the tender offer, and we have this in a merger, yeah, that needs approval, and we also have this with a capital increase. Yeah? These are the two corporate actions, yeah, that by law require shareholder approval. Yeah? And if the manager proposes this only in his own interest, yeah, but it's not in the interest of the shareholders will simply say no to this. Yeah, you can try to convince the market that the true value of time is larger than 175. Yeah? You can basically say, yeah, look, this is not true at all. Yeah? The market cap that we currently have is completely undervaluing it. Yeah? We have a lot of nice film projects underway. Yeah? When we merge with Warner, yeah, we get much stronger. Yeah? We invent new things, and when shareholders realize how profitable this is, our share price will go up. Yeah? And if you just wait and be patient, dear shareholders, yeah, wait until the share price will exceed 175. Yeah? The problem is, of course, that that 175 is really way beyond. Yeah, that's almost 50%, more than 50% above the current valuation. Yeah, so it may be a bit difficult to do so. Yeah. But there was one prominent example in Germany currently. The second largest bank, Commerzbank, is just fighting for its independence. Yeah, the biggest Italian bank bought some shares of Commerzbank and now tried to take over the whole bank. And the bank reacted by extreme cost cutting, and the share price of Commerzbank already has more than doubled. Yeah, maybe as a result of everything. Yeah, Commerzbank becoming more profitable, but also UniCredit, yeah, the bidding firm acquiring shares in the share market, and basically the expectation of shareholders, of course, that something in the future will happen. Yeah? But one thing is clear: if you drive up the share price above 175, shareholders will say no to the tender offer. Yeah? So the best advice, if you are the investment banker and you are on the defense mandate, the so-called defense mandate, you advise on how to react to this offer. Yeah? One thing is you have to bring up your share price above 175. Yeah? Because otherwise, how can you expect your shareholders to stay on board? Yeah? If you can exchange a share worth 160 into cash worth 175, yeah, why should shareholders say no to this? Yeah, just telling them be patient, yeah, wait for the bright future, may not be the best argument. Yeah, the best argument is, of course, bringing up the share price. And there are lots of things to do. Investment bankers will give a battery of things that are proven to increase your share price. Yeah, and it starts with an extra dividend, it continues with share repurchases, and all things that investment bankers know, you know, may drive up the share price. Yeah? But maybe 175 is just too much. Yeah? Probably not realistic. Yeah, you can renegotiate the merger. Yeah? You can say, yeah, dear Warner shareholders, look at this. Yeah? We simply gave you too much. Yeah? Our offer was too grateful. Yeah? The market responded negatively. Yeah? We can't act against the interest of our shareholders. Yeah? So please be happy with a smaller part of the combined entity. And Warner, we don't know. Yeah? The case doesn't say a lot about Warner. Yeah? Maybe Warner says, yeah, but then it's no longer attractive. Yeah? We support this only because our shareholders benefited from this. Yeah? This is actually the minimum that we want to achieve. We give up our own independence, yeah, and we do this only if our shareholders really benefit from this. So, probably also not, as I said, yeah. Search for white knight. Do you know what a white knight is?
Savior.
Sorry?
Savior.
Well, in takeover language, we have lots of medieval expressions. So this is a good knight. Yeah, there were bad knights who kill you, and there are good knights that protect you. Yeah, so this is a good one. But he basically steps in as a competitor to Time and makes an even bigger offer. Yeah, he's a friend of you, and he offers 180, and Paramount is out. Yeah? Of course, it is difficult to find this white knight, but suppose that you really think that the intrinsic value is way higher. Yeah? There are companies that know, yeah, that the market is way too low. Yeah? But in secret knowledge inside the firm, yeah, there are basically R&D projects, patents, yeah, that turn into profitable products only in the future. Yeah? And if you have an expert looking at the data, he may be convinced and say, yes, this is indeed completely undervalued. Now we have the option. A white knight basically is a friend of the management, and they get access to all the information. Paramount, of course, has no access to the information beyond public information. They only see the financial statement. The white knight basically can come into your company, can turn everything upside down, find the truth, and if he then says 180, yeah, then maybe your argument is really true. Yeah? You may not be able to convince the capital market that the true value is 180, yeah? But maybe you can convince a white knight, yeah, simply by creating maximum transparency, open all your corporate data files. Maybe it's such a good friend that he even pays a little bit more, just because he likes you, yeah, but that's unlikely. Yeah, we are talking about billions of money, yeah, nobody is offering this just because he's your friend. Yeah, and then one last thing, you can change the merger plan such that time shareholders do no longer need to approve. Yeah, you can change to a cash deal instead of a share deal. What does this mean? A merger is a share deal. Yeah? The technology is basically you create new shares and you hand over these new shares to Warner in exchange for their shares. Yeah? And that's why you need shareholder approval. Yeah? What could be a cash deal? What could this mean? Well, easy to guess. Nothing special. Exactly. You pay in cash. Yeah? Let's think about. Where was the date? Okay. So you go here. Yeah. You say, Warner, your company is worth 8 billion. I'm a company worth 6 billion, and maybe a very small percent is cash lying around. 6 billion is the value of everything, yeah? Machines and cash. Yeah? But if you put 8 billion cash on the table, that's enough to buy Warner. Yeah? So you simply say, yeah, I buy all the Warner shares. Yeah, of course you need debt financing. Yeah? Equity financing is not possible because you have to ask your shareholders. Yeah? You go to a bank and say, I need 8 billion. Yeah? Would you please give this to me? Yeah? Then I can simply take the cash and buy Warner with it. Yeah? And the nice thing is, managers can buy whatever they like. Yeah? If they find a bank that provides it with 8 billion, they can simply take the 8 billion and make an offer to Warner. Yeah? So this would be a tender offer. This would become a tender offer very much like Paramount is offering $175 for Time. Time would offer whatever dollars for every Warner shareholder. Yeah? And the offer would be so attractive that the Warner shareholders say, wow, this is a great offer. I take the money. Probably you need much more than 8 billion because you want to have a nice premium. Yeah? Paramount offered 50% premium. Yeah? Maybe you also offer a 50% premium and you offer to pay instead of 8 billion, 12 billion. Yeah? And the question is, of course, would you find a bank to do this? Yeah? But this is exactly what they did. Yeah? So they basically said, shareholders do not want what we want. Yeah? We have to overcome shareholder resistance. We have to prevent this vote. Yeah? If we ask them to vote, they will say no to the merger and they will want to sell to Paramount. Yeah? So we have to abandon this plan and we have to turn it into a cash deal. Yeah? And the case is very, very prominent because this has become one of the biggest lawsuits in American history. Sorry, this is wrong here. No. Yeah. So the Time merger was valuing the shares at roughly 125. This was at the end of the case, the valuation by the investment bankers, but Paramount, of course, offered 175, and later actually still increased this. So when it became clear the time shareholders would not approve this, time management changed the merger and changed it to a cash offer. And they indeed acquired Warner. And Paramount basically said, this is a breach of fiduciary duties. They sued the time management board and said, you have an obligation to act in the interest of your shareholders. The shareholders of the owners, you basically manage the money of the owners, and you should do it in a way that is good for the owners. If you say 125 is better than 175, then this obviously is not in the interest of the shareholders. And we learn, if you pursue your own interest, if this is basically your true motivation, then you may be accused and you may end up in the courts because you misused your power in order to act against the interest of your shareholders. So this became a very, very important law case. By the way, this is the so-called Time magazine, and it's the most prominent weekly magazine in the United States. I think still today, a weekly magazine about everything. And then came the landmark decision. And the directors of Time basically said the question whether the Warner transaction should be pursued or not, the question whether this is in the corporation's interest is for them to decide, not the shareholders. Basically they said if we prefer to merge with Warner, and if the shareholders prefer to merge with Paramount, the shareholders do not count. Because they have elected the managers, they have they have empowered them to run the company, and now they basically have to decide. They said they have addressed it deliberately in a good faith. And while some shareholders, even a majority of shareholders, may disagree with the wisdom of their choice, that fact provides no reason for this court to force them under the guise of fiduciary obligation to take another more popular course of action. Basically the court said there was no breach of fiduciary duties. And that was a real surprise, because it really sounds like bad behavior. The American managers have fiduciary duties. They must act in the interest of shareholders. But in the law case, basically the court found no breach of this duty. This is particular to Delaware. In the United States, there were 50 different states, and all states have a different stock corporation law and a different stock corporation courts. And Delaware is a state where many corporations are incorporated, and this state is well known for being extremely manager-friendly. So whatever managers do, they support. As a result, many corporations are incorporated in Delaware. They pay their taxes in Delaware. So Delaware profits from this. But the price is that managers love Delaware and shareholders hate Delaware. Obviously. So directors are not required to favor short-term shareholder profit, 175 instead of 120 or so, over a long-term corporate plan, as long as there is a reasonable basis to maintain the corporate plan. So all you have to do is to show a plan that sometime in the future, maybe in 10 years from now, shows a value of above 175. And then you basically say, the capital market is stupid, it cannot see the true value. Look at my plan, how beautiful the future is. And my plan has the more value than 175. So Delaware courts really make it easy for corporations to, make it easy for managers to pursue their own self-interest.
Can I ask,
Sure.
it seems to me like Paramount is pretty ambitious and you really want to eat the timing. So what would happen if the were a law rule that they have some breach of fiduciary duties? Like maybe like the merger will stop and
there were a few cases where actually the court found that the management acted in its own self-interest and there was a breach of fiduciary duties. And in those cases, the managers usually are sent into prison or have to pay large fines. at least large banks. Now prisoners is the exception. Yeah, and then of course the shareholder preferences get executed, yeah, and then the takeover takes place. Paramount, I think at the end, offered more than $200 and still were not successful. So yeah, this was so hotly debated because it was so outrageous. Yeah, it was so obvious. Yeah, basically 99.9% of the shareholders said, yeah, we hate our own manager. We want to be taken over by Paramount. And the manager said, I don't care at all. I have my corporate plan, and my corporate plan in 10 years, yeah, has a beautiful future. Yeah, and I'm the manager, and I decide this. Yeah, and he took over Warner. Yeah, with the help of lots of banking loans, and yeah, he was successful. Yeah, so the lesson from this is, yeah, when you are a shareholder, select your manager very carefully. Or, well, today this would never be repeated because today's managers are incentivized by stock options. Yeah, this merger kept the job secure, but of course the stock price went down. Yeah, so if your payment is depending on stock options, yeah, you receive a large decline in payment. Yeah? If the manager would have accepted the Paramount offer, he would have been rich, yeah, because all his stock options make a lot of profit. Of course, he would also lose the job. Yeah? But that, yeah, with stock options, the manager would be much more likely, yeah, to choose the Paramount offer. Yeah? But at that point of time, stock options were more or less uncommon. Yeah, so that manager mainly saw the risk of losing his job. Yeah, and that apparently, of course, you never know. We accuse these people of being egoistic, yeah, and overconfident, or at least interested in his own job, yeah, and not in the shareholder's interest. And of course, maybe we are wrong. Yeah, maybe this is an honest guy that truly was optimistic and that said, that basically deeply believed, yeah, that the Paramount offer was doing bad to the company. Sometimes the people say, it's not because I lose my job, it's because when the Japanese, yeah, Paramount was, is Paramount? No, is it Japanese? No, I think it's American. But whatever. When Paramount takes us over, many of us will be fired. Yeah? Like Elon Musk taking over Twitter. Yeah? And then he said, I am also responsible for my employees. Yeah, not only for my shareholders. Yeah, shareholders may love it, but employees hate it. Yeah, I have to care about everybody, yeah, and I say no. Yeah, that's another kind of excuse. Yeah, but here basically the discussion was really only about shareholder interest. Yeah, under Delaware law, you cannot make decisions that are violating shareholders' interest. Yeah, but the manager basically can use these kind of excuses, yeah, to get rid of the problem. So the Time Board rejected the Paramount offer. Paramount increased the offer to 200. Time, then there was some more details, like a poison pill. This is a defense weapon. Time basically was resistant, continued to be resistant, and was blocking. Then basically they increased to 70, the Warner deal. Let's look where the initial Warner, this is, 45, was the initial Warner price. And after 45 before and 48 afterwards. Warner, of course, also needed to accept this. And Time ultimately paid 70, much more than they offered immediately. So just in order to fight Time, they increased the offer price for Warner tremendously. And the reason was, of course, that the cash offer does not require shareholder approval. Time shareholders were very angry. But they had no say on this. The manager had enough money to pay this $70 to every Warner shareholder and simply did this. And it was financed with debt and also asset sales. Time was smaller than Warner, a smaller company taking over a larger company. That means the financing of this is really not easy. And in that circumstance, they really sold a large part of time, they raise as much debt as possible in order to do this. Yeah, Paramount then sued Time in order because they thought this was illegal, and the court rules for Time and didn't see a violation. Yeah, and if you look at the time afterwards, if you, from a shareholder viewpoint, one share of Time stock at that point of time was valued at 127. If you just look roughly 10 years later, it was worth a lot of money, 538. But if you would have invested $200 of the Paramount offer just in the S&P 500, this money would have increased to $1,000. So, of course, that is still inconclusive. So both, what most professors would conclude, it is still obviously the bad decision. Taking the $200, investing this in a diversified portfolio was making much more money than accepting than even the time management. So it's roughly 50%. So the decision of Time not to accept the Paramount offer may have cost 50% of the wealth of the shareholders. And I like this case in particular simply because it gives you a good impression of the conflict of interest that we have in an M&A transaction. Many people have different interests, and one of the most important interests is quite often the interest by the management board to keep their jobs, or to run a large company. And the interest of the shareholders is quite often opposite. And who basically is more powerful depends on who has the decision. Shareholders must approve a merger, but they have no say in the cash deal. And that's why the merger was abandoned. And managers can do with cash whatever they like. And if the company sells assets and raises cash, if the company goes to banks and raises cash, they can buy whatever they like. Under the so-called business judgment rule, the managers can basically do with the cash whatever they want, and there were almost no restrictions. So, so this is a nice introduction into the next chapter. In mergers and acquisitions, we talk about what determines whether corporations grow by merging, and who are the people that basically make the decisions. Is it the shareholders or is it the managers? And when you have conflicting interests, basically, how do we find this? And before we actually start, there were two opposing views on this. In particular, here in the 80s, Wall Street mergers and acquisitions bankers, Wall Street lawyers make a fortune of money with this business. So many people work in the M&A sector and make a lot of money from this. And many American professors basically think this is waste. There were way too many takeovers, and they only serve special interests of few, and the whole society would be actually better off by having less takeovers. And other people, and they would say, this merger of Time and Warner is not a good thing. If you look at the market reaction, there was almost no synergies expected. The people said, there were economies of scale and we can reduce the costs, but the capital market obviously was not convinced, because the total market cap after announcement was just slightly above before, almost unchanged. So the capital market obviously doesn't believe the stories told by managers. And this transaction has cost a lot of money, many investment bankers, many lawyers employed, and in the end mainly served to protect the job interests of the manager. The Time CEO that simply wanted to retain his job, or ideally get a larger empire, managing Time and Warner. Yeah? That looks like the individual interest of individual people basically dictates M&A, and M&A is actually a bad thing. If there would be no M&A, there would be no Paramount offer, there would be no Warner offer, and Time and Warner would stay independent, and maybe that solution would have been the best of all. Other people argue it is absolutely important. And we will see. Most people would say recreate value. If you ask an investment banker, what is your job? I help my customers to create value through M&A. And Time Warner is just an exception. So mergers and acquisitions. Basically transfer ownership. Shares are bought by somebody else, by a corporation. And of course also a massive reallocation of resources. Shares stand for the machines, and these machines of Warner are now controlled by Time. And so we really talk about resource allocation and about policy. After takeovers, quite often firms are restructured. You have to think about Twitter. There was 90% layoffs. Divisions merged, divested, or even dissolved. Very often you buy something, but you need so much debt in order to buy this that directly afterwards you try to sell as much as possible in order to pay back your debt. And then you basically do a piecemeal liquidation. In the case of Conti, it's already gone. If somebody would take over Conti, it is most likely that he would cut this company into two pieces and say this is a tire producing company and the other is doing other car parts, and we will separate this. So the key question is, do these two parts belong together or should they be separated? What is creating more shareholder value? And we want to understand why and when do takeovers occur. Is it synergy gains or maybe market power? You get more powerful, so you can charge higher prices. Is it bad managers that are basically wiped out by M&A? Is it unused tax shields? Managers do not like debt, because debt means bankruptcy risk, and then maybe they will have to work hard in order to prevent bankruptcy, and therefore value increasing opportunities by using debt are not used. Or other things. And then of course we also think about the consequences of takeovers. Is it really value creation or is it value destruction? Again, many different opinions. Who gains, who loses? And in the end, are there too many or too few takeovers? These are, there was a rich academic literature on this. I think few things have been studied as intensively, simply because there were so many cases. Each case comes with lots of data. So this is a rich field for empirical research, and basically generations of PhD students have done research in this area because they wanted to become an M&A banker and started their research in that area. Just distinguish between merger, acquisition, and a tender offer. When we think about a merger, then basically we think that there were two shares before and there was just one share remaining. And therefore, the shareholders basically decide on this. We exchange our shares for the new shares. So it needs approval from both firms, shareholders, and usually it is friendly because the management boards first sit together and say, we want to merge. Who will become the boss? Who will become the chief financial officer? And so forth. Then it is presented to the shareholders, then the shareholders approve. So this is something where all people basically approve. In practice, of course, one firm is usually the dominating firm. Quite often they are called mergers among equals, just because nobody wants to lose his face. But quite often afterwards, one firm is dominating. You know the American car manufacturer Chrysler, and you know Mercedes-Benz. And that was one of the most disastrous but also famous mergers. they called the merger vehicle Daimler-Benz and Chrysler merged, but then soon later, basically it was clear that Daimler-Benz was only dominating. Chrysler had been acquired, and there was also lawsuits and many allegations that the term merger vehicle was a misuse because Daimler was so much stronger. But again, it's interesting to see why actually they are strong. Yeah, in an acquisition, that's the cash deal. Yeah? Paramount had an acquisition offer, and also Time then later on acquired Warner in the cash deal. So board and management of the target firm may agree or not agree. If they agree, it's called a friendly takeover. If they not agree, it's a hostile. The technology is usually a tender offer. Yeah? Paramount issued a tender offer for Time. Yeah? Please, dear Time shareholders, decide if you want to sell. Please tell me, and only if at least 50% sell, then the transaction is completed. Yeah? Tender offers are contracts. I offer something, but I want at least 50%, or I want at least 75%. Yeah? And then there's a complex legal process around this in order to make sure that everybody has the right information and so forth. So this is basically the technology to conduct the acquisition. In principle, of course, you can also acquire shares in the open market. But if you want to buy 50% of the shares of the company, you usually don't go to the stock market and say who is going to sell. Yeah. And then, of course, we have this question about friendly and hostile. Yeah? The Paramount attempt to acquire Time was clearly hostile. Yeah? Time didn't want it. Yeah? The acquisition of Warner by Time was friendly, because the Warner management board supported this transaction. Yeah? But what the people say publicly in the press is quite often not the truth. Yeah? So maybe Warner basically only said yes to the transaction because they were bribed or convinced with some other thing. Maybe they were threatened with being fired if they don't agree. Don't forget, in a merger quite often many managers go home. So why should they love this? They are resistant, but of course they think carefully what to say to the public. Okay, some more terminology. Horizontal is when two firms in the same industry. Daimler and Chrysler are two car manufacturers. When they merge, this is horizontal. Vertical is clear when you take over along the value chain. So you acquire a supplier, and then you don't have to buy the supplies anymore. You can directly produce them. And conglomerate, this is what Continental is. You have one segment that is producing tires, and the other segment is producing car electronics. You could say it's both the car industry, those tires are made of rubber, and the other part is basically electronics. And you would say this has only a very, very loose connection. And therefore, I would call this a conglomerate. If it's even more conglomerate, if it's completely unrelated. And we had huge conglomerations in history. For example, Daimler-Benz. Well, Daimler-Benz for a long time was the by far most profitable and largest corporation in Germany. And they made so much money that they did not know what to do with it. And they could give it to the shareholders, but that was not very popular with the management. Why should we pay our money to the shareholders? So they started to buy all kinds of companies. They started to buy an airplane producer. They started to buy a producer of trains. And then basically said, we become a traffic company. Traffic is by car, by train, by airplane. We are an integrated technology. Then they went into starships. They invested in rockets for the stars. They also invested in consumer appliances. A company that was building irons for ironing the clothes and any kind of kitchen machines. Completely unrelated. Yeah, simply because they had so much money, they had to invest it, they didn't want to give it back to the shareholders. And all these investments were all disasters. Not any of them turned out profitable. Most of them either went bankrupt. There was no bigger disaster in history than the sequence of takeovers by Daimler-Benz. The most successful car. Think about Apple. Apple is also hugely successful, but they don't do anything with the money. They produce Apples and iPods and iBooks and so forth, but that's closely related. They never did something completely outside. But Google, for example, is another cash cow, and Google basically has only one business, the search engine, and all the money that is made by the search engine is basically invested in all kinds of things. The most important is Waymo. Waymo is this autonomous driving cars in California. They have invested 30 billion already into Waymo. And they have lots of other. It's usually high-tech startups, but completely unrelated. Constructing autonomously driving cars is something completely different from operating a search engine. So this is another typical conglomerate. It did not work at all for Daimler, but it worked fairly well so far for Google, for whatever reasons. When we think about conglomerates, we mainly think about, is the manager able to basically make the right decisions? Does somebody who is an expert in running a search engine, is he also an expert in setting up autonomous car producing factories like Waymo? And is the Mercedes-Benz boss able to basically diversify into trains and airplanes and so forth? In M&A, there is usually the acquirer of the target. A merger of equals, where two equal parties basically merge, where you don't know who is the acquirer, doesn't happen very often. And the biggest of all was still today a German company, very strange. The biggest takeover ever in history was the takeover of Mannesmann by Vodafone, and this is so long ago, and it is still the biggest. And when I was young, there was when you opened the press, double-sided advertisements, don't sell to Vodafone in the German press. Every of these ads had cost a fortune. And of course the press was full of articles. What happens if the Vodafone acquires one of the largest German companies? Mannesmann was a very, very traditional, very powerful German company. And if you just think about the values, investment bankers usually get a percentage of this value. Maybe 1%, maybe 2%. But the fact that the investment banks make so much money really is a function of the huge values that these transactions sometimes have. Mergers and takeovers come in waves. Here, before the Great Depression, in 1929, we had a worldwide depression. Before that, we had a merger wave. We had a merger wave in the 60s. The 60s merger wave was mainly conglomeration. People thought they want to diversify into other fields. Like Daimler in the 80s, that was the, Paramount was in the 80s, that was basically a hostile takeover wave. Eat or be eaten, become so big that you cannot be swallowed. That was really the 80s. Then came the 90s, that was basically, here was the dot-com bubble. Everybody tried to become an internet firm. They acquired some other internet firms. And then here, this is mainly globalization. People all of a sudden said, we need to become a global firm. We need some Chinese footprint in order to produce cheaply in China when we are an American firm. We need global sourcing and very cheap supplies. And then these mergers were quite often across the globe in order to bring the costs down. And if you're an M&A banker and you work in this area or you start in this area, that's a really bad chance. There was evidence, interesting enough, if you look 20 years afterwards, yeah, what is the overall lifetime salary of the investment bankers? And it really depends on the year when you started. If you started in a good year, your lifetime salary is much higher than if you started in a bad year. It's like with wine. Yeah? Good red wine from France, yeah, has a so-called vintage year effect. Yeah? If you have been growing in a good year, yeah, then basically you become a very good wine, and you are very valuable. Yeah? With investment bankers, it's a bit like this. Yeah? You are born in the right year when you left university. Yeah? A new technology wave came on, lots of transactions were made, yeah? You quickly became successful and prominent, got a good reputation, yeah? That helped you also through the next crisis, yeah? Because you are well known already, yeah? And after 20 years, yeah, you have made a good fortune. Yeah? But if you start in a bad year, yeah, then for 3 years you only work, you have a bad reputation because you don't have a track record of great transactions. Investment bankers basically all know, oh, he did this transaction, he did that transaction, yeah, glorious people. Yeah, but if you start in a bad year, you don't have that opportunity. So you need much longer to do so. So these waves are really more important than you think. Yeah, and I don't go through these details I just told you. But these, yeah, conglomerate mergers, hostile takeovers, yeah, these are really things that changed the time. Yeah? In the 80s, when I was a student, we were full of hostile takeovers. Yeah? And the so-called corporate raiders, yeah, became richest people. They were individuals, yeah? And their business was just, we buy firms, we cut them into pieces, yeah? We do piecemeal liquidation, we fire the people, yeah? We don't care what the employees say, we don't care what other people say. Yeah, this is our understanding of American capitalism. And of course these people were feared by many. Yeah, becoming the victim of a hostile takeover was something that people were very afraid of. But they disappeared after '89. Yeah, the Paramount Time case was really one of the last. And the reason is simply that American managers found their way to prevent this. Yeah, they influenced the courts, yeah, they found Delaware to be even more friendly, and then basically the hostile takeovers disappeared. Yeah, but the takeover actually was even bigger after 2000, but they become many different reasons. Yeah. It's quite often technology that creates mergers. And the company needs new technology and then simply buys the company with the right technology. You all know Volkswagen, that's a nice example in this respect. Volkswagen, of course, is an old-fashioned car manufacturer, and they needed, well, the future car will be basically software defined. Yeah? It is a running computer, yeah? So you need to have a good car software. And Volkswagen tried hard, and they spent billions to develop their own software. They realized we can't do it. Yeah, we have no idea how to do it. And then they bought Rivian, an American company, yeah, that basically has this technology. Yeah, and they spent 4 or 5 billion on a stake in Rivian just in order to get access to the technology. Yeah, and from next year on, yeah, all Volkswagen will have this software developed by Rivian. Yeah, so this is quite often. Yeah? Even if you're such a large company like Volkswagen, yeah, you have so much money to spend, and you actually spend billions, yeah, on your own. Yeah? They've created a large company that has no other task than to develop the software of the Volkswagen for the future. But it was not successful. Yeah? So M&A is quite often the last resort, yeah? If you can't get the resources that you need, and you urgently need something. Yeah. Now let's look at market reactions. Yeah? In the Time Warner case, we saw the market reaction. Yeah? The Time stock price went down, the Warner stock price went up. Yeah? And we saw why this is so. Yeah? Of course, the offer was very kind to offer. Yeah? If you well, quite often you translate this into a cash premium. Yeah? And in the Warner case, it was 10%. Yeah? That you calculated. On average, it was 43%. Yeah, so the Warner case was really not a very generous case. On average, the price offered has a substantial premium, more like Paramount and less like Warner. And the announcement price reaction of target and acquirer is much bigger for the target on average, 15%. In the case of Warner, we had only 5% or so. But the acquirer also gets a meager 1%. Early studies mainly found negative things. In the time case, the stock price went down. So in the time case, the announcement was bad news for the acquirer, Time, and was good news for the target Warner, if you call this target and acquirer. Many people would say, but this is a merger of equals. How can you call Time the acquirer? But effectively, I think it is clear that the Time was the active party here, and ultimately, of course, was turned to be the acquirer. Time ultimately paid in cash and became the acquirer. And the merger of equals resulted in a takeover of Warner by Time. And it's puzzling. Well, many things are puzzling. Why do acquirers do not gain? Why do all the shareholder returns flow to the target companies? And why are the premiums so high? When suppose you want to buy some shares of VinFast, of course you would never pay more than the market price. Why is somebody willing to pay such a high premium? Why is this necessary? And why do the price doesn't jump up 43% immediately? When you know that the transaction goes through, the price should immediately jump up 43%, because that's what on average is offered. So that's basically the question. And on the next slide, we will try to answer some of these questions. And this will give you a bit the mindset of investment bankers and understand a little bit how these markets operate. But first of all, when you think about why is somebody willing to pay 43% more, there must be real gains from the merger. And these are the gains that we also discussed already with in the Time Warner case. Quite often, cost reductions, synergies, layoffs of employees, redundant resources that you don't longer need. These are the things that are mentioned first. Sometimes there are revenue enhancements. For example, when Daimler merged with Chrysler, they argued Chrysler is an American company, they find it hard to sell cars in Germany because they don't have a franchise there. There were only a few shops where you can buy Chrysler cars. And there was no maintenance and repair for Chryslers. But we have all the Daimler dealerships. So the Daimler dealership can also sell Chrysler cars and can also do the repair and maintenance of Chrysler cars. So Chrysler finds it easier to sell in Germany, and maybe Mercedes-Benz can also use Chrysler facilities and can be more easy and better sell their cars in the US. There would be economies of scale. You are in a different market, but you still use each other resources, and in particular, these are economies of scope. By, for example, combining the marketing and distribution channels, the repair and the sales stations. And what Daimler, the example shows, if you have to manage not only Daimler but only Chrysler, the whole situation becomes much more larger and much more difficult to manage. The Daimler management team was very experienced to run a car producing factory in Germany, but they never had a car factory in the United States. And US citizens simply think and work differently. When you give the same order to a German, he will react differently to an American worker. And Daimler simply found it very hard to basically find the right style and the right management approach. in order to manage the new asset quite slightly in the United States. So complexity and size also is a disadvantage. Yeah? In the public statements, you only get the blue, yeah, but the red is something that the capital markets also consider. Yeah? And when the share price go down, yeah, then because the capital market thinks that this is a lie and this is the problem. Yeah? And that's why the share prices sometimes react differently from projected. Yeah, vertical integration, quite often hard to understand what the reason actually is. Yeah, Apple, for example, yeah, they have the operating system and the hardware. Yeah, this is usually separated between two suppliers. Yeah, in the Apple case, that is the core of the Apple. Yeah, they basically think the interconnection of these two are what the Apple customer feeling makes. Yeah, so for Apple, it may seem to make sense, but there are many other examples of vertical integration that also proved as a disaster. Yeah, I don't give you examples here. Yeah, this is our example with this technology. Yeah, for Volkswagen buying Rivian, just in order to get access to the technology, to the software that they have developed. Quite often, new technologies, highly experienced workers are difficult to get from the labor market. And you say, if we want to quickly develop something, we better buy an existing firm and tell them to work for us instead of founding something on the green field and trying to do it yourself. Monopoly gains. I wouldn't call this monopoly gains, this is market power. Monopoly is something that is forbidden. This is not my slide, this is actually, the slide comes from the London Business School originally, I think. These slides have wrong histories. And in some countries, people don't have a problem with the name monopoly. But of course, a monopoly is forbidden. But the reduction of competition is of course something that the antitrust authorities try to prevent. But the fact is quite often M&A activity reduces competition. And there was a lot of empirical evidence that this is actually the case. And prominent example are mobile phone markets. In most countries you have 4, 5, sometimes 6 mobile phone operators in the beginning. And after 20 years, you may have only 1 or 2 remaining. In the United States, there were 7. I think they have now only 3 remaining. And whenever there is a merger, and the antitrust authorities approve this, the prices in the market go up, the consumers basically pay, and the profits of the companies go up. So there was a lot of evidence that basically the price pressure, the competition is reduced by this. Efficiency gains, basically this is, what they mean here with efficiency gains is acquirers argue that they can run the target organization more efficiently. So this is not efficiency in the sense of economies of scale. This is efficiency of replacing bad managers. Many people, actually, many managers think there are good and bad managers. And whether the company is successful simply depends on who is managing, who is running the firm. Acquirers who do M&A are quite often successful companies. You need a lot of money to buy other companies. So you make a lot of profit, and if you make a lot of profit, you are quite often confident that you are a good manager. You must be good, otherwise you wouldn't have made so much money. And then you look at some other corporation that is loss-making, and you say, well, the reason must be that the manager is an idiot. So I buy the firm, throw out the manager, and replace him with my own people. And the problem is that many people basically are overconfident. There is an interesting research area in the M&A section that is called the overconfidence research. Overconfidence is hard to measure, but there are good measures on this. I tell you just as a segue how overconfidence is measured today. Suppose you are a manager and you are paid with stock options. And these stock options have some time that is called the vesting period where you must wait and see. Yeah? You are supposed to work hard to bring the stock price up. And at that point of time, of course, you have to wait and do not exercise. But then comes the so-called vesting date. And if you have been successful, the stock price is up, and you have the right to exercise the stock option, then economic theory tells you you should do so. Yeah? And you should invest your money better in the S&P 500 and diversify. But many people basically say, but the option is, I can still carry on the option. Yeah? I don't exercise. I'm so optimistic that the stock price will increase further in the future. Yeah? I just keep on betting on more money. Yeah? And one good measure of overconfidence is, do managers refrain from exercising stock options after vesting and after making lots of money, because they think they can make even more money. The interesting evidence is that these overconfident people make bad investment decisions. There is strong evidence that their overconfidence really turns them to be really optimistic. So in the end, of course, we want good managers to run the corporations, and there are clearly good and bad managers. But the most successful managers that have been performing well in the past, that are typically the acquirers, may not be the best managers for a poorly performing thing. Quite often, Daimler and Chrysler is a good example. Daimler, the most profitable car manufacturer in the world. Chrysler, in a crisis situation. Daimler simply thought, if we take over Chrysler, we will teach the Americans how to construct quality cars. We can easily increase the profit of Chrysler, and they did not succeed at all. They were incapable. They were unable to fix the Chrysler problems. Then there was this large topic, and hotly debated in the academic literature, called diversification. The conglomerate is nothing else than another word for diversification. A conglomerate group is basically a diversified group, and so the idea of having unrelated firms under one consolidated group. And finance professors basically say diversification is good, but investors can easily diversify themselves. They just buy different stocks. So why should corporations buy each other in order to diversify? If you ask the managers why they diversify, they basically say we want stability. I give you one example. Deutsche Bank is also a conglomerate in the financial sector because they do retail banking and corporate banking and investment banking and asset management all under one roof. You could say this should be 4 different banks. And Joseph Ackermann, the CEO, said, I need this because every of my 4 segments have good and bad years. And in a bad year, I do not want to report to my shareholders that the whole bank was bad. So I hope that always is at least one of these 4 segments is doing well, and then I can produce stable, good results for my shareholders. And he deeply believed that the shareholders expect stable profits. Of course, shareholders hate risk, they want stability, but as an academic I would still argue, but this is the wrong way to think about this. Shareholders want the investment bank to be stable, the commercial bank to be stable, but the kind of diversification or stability creation that you do is something that the shareholders can do themselves. They are not paying you for doing this, because if you combine stocks of different banking types, then you have this diversification. But people really deeply believe in this. And in the 60s, this conglomerate basically won. Markowitz was 58. Yeah? In '58, Markowitz invented his portfolio risk measurement approach. Yeah? It then quickly entered finance, and basically all finance students are now told, yeah, don't put all your money in one basket, yeah, build a diversified portfolio, but also the management professors taught this to their students. Yeah? Don't produce only sports cars, yeah? Produce also trucks and normal passenger cars, yeah? Because then if there was a crisis in one segment, the corporation will not go bankrupt. Yeah? And this kind of diversification has also been taught at universities. But it was actually killed by the takeover wave of the 80s. In these hostile takeovers in the 80s was mainly conglomerates. So corporate raiders bought these conglomerates and basically cut them into different individual small companies and sold these small companies. It's not that big is always beautiful. A big conglomerate is quite often a huge bureaucracy and very slow, very high cost. People then say, but we pay less for our bank and we can have a larger debt capacity. If we are a huge conglomerate, where we have always, in a crisis situation, never ever will all segments have a crisis. And it's true. These companies have better and easier access to the debt market. And maybe this is a better argument for diversification, but still, I think there was one buzzword that today is overwhelming almost everything. And stick to your core competence means you do only what you can do best. If you can run Ferrari, then you should concentrate on sports cars and nothing else. And if you can buses, then please produce buses, but nothing else. When a bus manufacturer tries to do sports cars, or if Ferrari tries to do buses, it can only end in disaster, because it's not the knowledge. And conglomeration is, of course, exactly this. So in the 60s, this was thought to be most important, but today it's almost only this. When large companies basically announce a divestiture, Siemens almost every year sells large parts of Siemens, and always they say it does no longer fit to our core competencies. We want to concentrate on some fields where we think that are most promising for us, where we have the most expertise, and everything else will be so out. So every year we look at the whole group and we cut out and sell everything that does no longer belong to our core competencies. Large groups sometimes operate that they can quickly reallocate assets. For example, you have Ferrari and the bus company. You have them both. There were some years when all people want to drive Ferrari, and there were some years when nobody wants to drive Ferrari. And everybody wants to buy buses. If you control them both, you can simply say, the Ferrari workers, please walk to the bus company and start building buses. And the machines that we normally use Ferrari are now used to produce buses. That is a reallocation of resources in order to respond to changing demands. But again, not really convincing to many people. And this liquidity kind of thing, when the owner of a private firm sells its firm, of course he gets liquidity. If you are an entrepreneur, you have your own company, and you can basically exchange this for cash. And afterwards, of course, well, before you have responsibility, you have duty to all your workers, and you have no liquidity at all. Sometimes you are a rich person, but you actually suffer from your company. After selling, you are a rich man, you have cash, and you can retire, go to the Bahamas, and enjoy your life. But again, I find it a bit surprising that this is a part of diversification and somewhat of kind of time, of course, you want to sell and you want the cash. Yeah, an interesting thing is earnings growth, simply because this is where finance professors really get allergic a little bit. Earnings per share is something that is extremely important for many firms. When a company like Continental or Chime or Warner, whoever, is announcing a decreasing or increasing earnings per share, that is good or bad news. And we want to look at this. And M&A has an impact on this. Let me prepare this. Well, one thing should be clear from a shareholder. We will have a break in a few minutes. From a shareholder value perspective, what is important is just the value of your shares. Yeah? So if M&A is increasing your wealth, it should bring these share prices up. Yeah? And that's the only thing that you're really interested in. Earnings per share is accounting. Yeah? Accounting can signal something, can be a sign of something. Yeah, hopefully share prices go up when earnings go up, but if you only look at accounting and if you have some tricks to manipulate accounting, then accounting can easily be the opposite of value creation. So, even when a merger does not create any value, it's possible to increase earnings per share through a merger. And managers that focus on earnings per share of course like to do these kinds of things. So they do not concentrate on value creation, they only concentrate on this kind of accounting figures. And in particular, well, on the next slide we have this example. There were two corporations which are really easy to understand. One is an established and the other is a new corporation, and they both have $5 earnings per share. But they both have 1 million shares outstanding. But the old corporation is not expected to grow in the future and has a lower share price. But this corporation, basically people believe that the earnings will grow in the future and therefore has a higher share price. And now, let's think how they take over. How we take over changes the earnings per share. So let's write this down. Let's call the one old and the other new. Both have 1 million shares, $5 earnings per share. And the old one has a share price of $60. Okay. And now you can again become practical investment bankers. So, New World acquires Old World, using its own stock, and to take over adds no value. So basically, old plus new will have, well, the market cap is of course $5 million here and there, because it's 1 million shares. times 60, this is 60 million. And here we have a share price of 100, so we have a market cap of $100 million. And the new corporation will, by definition, have a market cap of 160. Yeah? There were no synergies, no value added, no value distributed. Yeah, so what is the value of New World after the acquisition? The market cap is 160, and of course we don't know the share price yet. Yeah? And therefore we also don't know the earnings per share. Yeah? So how many shares will this new corporation have? So this is the acquirer. Yeah, so they print new shares and exchange the new shares for the old company shares. Yeah, how many shares do they have to print? Yeah, they have 1 million shares. That's 1 million shares outstanding right now. Yeah, but they are worth $100. Yeah, they want to buy shares that are they are only worth $60. Yeah? So what would be the exchange ratio? Yeah. 6 to 10. Yeah? They offer. Yeah? They offer 0.6 new shares, yeah, because 0.6 times $100 is $60. This is the fair price for these people. Yeah? When they do this for 1 old shares, yeah, and of course multiply this by 1 million, yeah, this will become 600,000 shares in order to buy all the old shares. Yeah? So the new corporation basically prints 600,000 new shares. These shares are exchanged by the shareholders. Yeah? There is no premium here, just at fair market conditions. And then we have 1.6 million shares. What are the earnings per share of the new merged corporation? Actually, we have to multiply this and multiply this, and then basically first can calculate the aggregate earnings, yeah? Because we have a new number of shares. Yeah? So this is 5 million, this is 5 million, yeah? That means $10 million, and the earnings per share is of course 10 million divided by 160 million shares. Okay, can anybody calculate this, please? Sorry? 6. 25?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the result. Yeah? And compare this with the 5, yeah? And you see the earnings per share have increased. Yeah? So it looks on first sight as if shareholders would be better off. Yeah? Through the merger, yeah? Every shareholder received 5 before, and now receives 6.25. Yeah? And it looks as if everybody should be happy. Yeah? But there was absolutely no value generated. Yeah? It's just an accounting trick. Yeah? And finance is full of these accounting tricks. Yeah? It's nothing spectacular behind it. Yeah? If with some experience, you develop intuition, yeah, and you know that whenever the relation between the share price and the earnings per share is different, yeah, by this kind of takeover. Yeah. If you think about what would happen if instead the old firm takes over the new firm, yeah, then we would have exactly the opposite. Yeah, the earnings per share would go down because they need only 600,000 shares, but they need more than 1 million shares to buy the new firm. So, yeah. So the bottom line is you can do a lot to basically affect the accounting numbers. Yeah, and analysts quite often say, yeah, but now the stock price should go up, yeah, because the new manager says my stock price of $100 is 20 times earnings per share. Yeah? And then you would say, yeah, 20 times 6.25, is this our new stock price? Yeah? You must be very naive to believe this. But many managers argue that way. Yeah? They hope, yeah, that the market still applies this 20 times stock price. Yeah? In that case, the stock price, of course, would be much higher. Yeah? But the stock price, well, 20.6.75 is, this would be 125 or so. Yeah? But what is the truth? There is 160 million in market cap. There is 160. Yeah, there is 1.6 million shares. Yeah, so the share price will be just 100. Yeah, if you calculate the share price, yeah, this is of course, yeah, with the market cap. We have no debt here, yeah, so we just add the market cap. It's 160 million. Divided by the number of shares, 1.6 million shares, and that is, of course, it stays at $100. Yeah? So it is a fallacy, yeah, to believe that this company will stay at the same earnings per share multiplier. Yeah? Many people that love this earnings per share increase, yeah, hope that the market will be naive, yeah, and basically value this with the same multiplier of 20 as before. Yeah? But basically, you have apples and oranges here. Yeah? This apple was trading at 12 times earnings. Yeah? This orange was trading at 20 times earnings. Yeah? And this here is, of course, an average. Yeah? It was trading at 16 times earnings, right in the middle between the two. Yeah, and when you hear managers say, whenever I do M&A, one precondition is that it does not deteriorate our earnings per share. Yeah? And many corporations say this. And then you realize that accounting is important. Yeah? People are very reluctant to go to the press or go to the shareholders and say, our earnings per share have declined. Yeah? But this is not important. Yeah? If an old firm buys a new firm, yeah, it's a natural consequence that the earnings per share go down. Yeah? Yeah? Shareholders, managers should feel bad, yeah, if they destroy value, yeah? And they should feel good if they increase the value. Yeah? And earnings per share is simply not the right metric to look at in order to judge on this. Okay, but I see how tired you are, and I think you urgently need this little break. So let's enjoy the break time for 10 minutes and then continue.
gì đâu.